They said the coffee on the 47th floor of the sleek glass and steel monolith known as the Sterling Vance Tower was the best in the city. It wasn't because of the beans, which were merely adequate, nor the high-tech Swiss machines that hissed and steamed with automated precision. It was because of Elena. To the occupants of that rarefied air, the traders, the analysts, the executives in their $1,000 suits, Elena was just part of the furniture. An old woman, somewhere past 60, with hair more salt than pepper pulled back in a severe functional bun. She moved with a quiet, shuffling limp, her left leg dragging almost imperceptibly. Her hands, when they weren't steadying a tray of porcelain cups, carried a fine, constant tremor. She wore a drab gray uniform that was always immaculately clean, but seemed designed to make her disappear into the brushed steel and muted taupe background of the executive lounge. She rarely spoke, and when she did, her voice was a near whisper, her eyes perpetually downcast. "More coffee, sir?" "Right away, ma'am." She was a ghost who served caffeine, a relic. In a world of ambitious, predatory 20-somethings, she was an anomaly, a deferential whisper from a bygone era. They saw her tremor and thought her frail. They saw her limp and thought her broken. They saw her silence and thought her simple. They were wrong. So profoundly, catastrophically wrong. The epicenter of this misjudgment was Sterling Preston, the senior vice president for whom the tower was partly named. Preston was a man sculpted from arrogance and Ivy League credentials. Tall, with a smile that never reached his cold, calculating eyes, he treated the 47th floor as his personal fiefdom and its inhabitants as his court. Elena, to him, was less than a vassal. She was a prop. "Elena, darling," he'd boom across the lounge, ensuring he had an audience of his junior acolytes. "Try to keep the coffee in the cup today. It's not a complex mission, even for you." A ripple of sycophantic laughter would follow. Elena would just nod, her face a mask of placid subservience. "Yes, Mr. Preston. I'll be more careful." Her hands would tremble a little more as she poured his Americano, the dark liquid shimmering near the rim. He enjoyed this, the small power play. He saw the tremor as fear, as the nervous tick of an incompetent old woman terrified of losing her menial job. He had no idea the tremor was the ghost of 1,000 adrenaline-fueled hours, the thrumming of a nervous system rewired by explosions and surgical precision in the dark. He didn't see the way her eyes, while seemingly looking at the floor, were actually tracking reflections in the polished chrome of the coffee machine, mapping the positions of every person in the room, noting the new security guard by the elevator bank and the slightly too tense posture of a visitor in the corner. Her subservience was camouflage. Her silence was surveillance. One Tuesday morning, the humiliation was particularly acute. A delegation from a Japanese tech firm was visiting, and Preston was in full peacock mode. He strode into the lounge, his voice echoing off the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a god's-eye view of the city. "Elena, we need the good stuff, the Blue Mountain, and for God's sake, try not to spill on our guests. A clean presentation is everything." Elena nodded, her whisper barely audible. "Yes, Mr. Preston." She moved with her usual quiet efficiency, her cart gliding silently across the marble floor. As she approached the conference table where Preston and his guests were seated, a young analyst named Greg, eager to curry favor, stuck his foot out just a little too far. It was casual, dismissive, an act of petty cruelty. Elena's foot caught. For a moment, time seemed to slow. To the onlookers, it was a clumsy old woman stumbling, but in Elena's mind, a different calculus was at play. Center of gravity shifting, tray angle at 40 degrees, liquid momentum vector northeast, options, drop and roll, absorb impact with left side, negative, old injury. Option 2, pivot on ball of right foot, use tray's momentum to swing at level, high probability of partial spillage, low probability of total loss. She executed option 2. Her body, which seemed so stiff and slow, moved with a sudden unnatural fluidity. She twisted, her bad leg barely protesting, and the tray of cups and the silver pot of coffee swung in a wild arc before she brought it back under control. Only a few drops sloshed onto the floor, missing the priceless rug and the guests' expensive shoes entirely. She was upright, the tray steady, her face impassive. Greg snickered. "Whoa, careful there, Grandma." Preston's face was a thundercloud of fury. The stumble, however minor, had momentarily broken his performance. Elena, what in God's name is wrong with you? You're a liability. Look at you shaking like a leaf. Get out. Just get someone else to do this. Jessica, he snapped at his assistant, handle the coffee. Elena, go polish something, anything. Just make yourself scarce. I'm sorry, Mr. Preston, she whispered, her voice tight. She backed away, her cart squeaking in the sudden heavy silence. She didn't look at their faces. She didn't need to. She could feel the contempt, the pity, the amusement. As she retreated to her small galley kitchen, she passed a young intern named Chloe, who looked at her with genuine concern. Are you okay, Elena? Chloe asked quietly, handing her a napkin. Elena gave a small, tired nod. I'm fine, dear, thank you. Her hand closed around the napkin, and for a second, the tremor stopped. Completely. Her fingers were steady, her grip firm. It was a flicker of something else, a hint of the woman beneath the uniform. Then, just as quickly, the mask was back in place, and she shuffled into the pantry, disappearing from view. Inside the small, windowless room, she leaned against a metal shelf, her eyes closed. She didn't feel shame. She felt a cold, familiar anger. Not at them, at the situation, at the role she had to play. Her left hand went to her right forearm, tracing the jagged, raised lines of scar tissue hidden beneath the gray fabric of her sleeve. She took a slow, measured breath, the kind a sniper takes before the world narrows to a single point. In, hold, out. The tremor in her hand subsided. The tactical mind, the one that saw the world in angles and threats, receded, replaced by the quiet, shuffling coffee lady. The camouflage was back in place. The day wore on. The Japanese delegation left. Preston preened about his success. Elena continued her rounds, a phantom pushing a cart, refilling water glasses, wiping down counters, utterly invisible once more. But something was wrong. It was a collection of small things, dissonant notes in the symphony of the office. The new security guard by the elevator, his posture wasn't just tense, it was military. The way his eyes didn't scan the room, but methodically cleared it, sector by sector. The small, almost imperceptible bulge under the left side of his jacket, too rigid for a wallet. Then, there were the delivery men who had brought a large crate to the IT department on the 46th floor an hour ago. They hadn't used the service elevator, a breach of building protocol. Elena had seen them from the corner of her eye. They moved with the quiet, economical grace of athletes or soldiers. Their faces were hard, their eyes cold and watchful. When one had dropped a pen, he hadn't bent over to pick it up. He'd squatted, keeping his head on a swivel. A combat squat. Anomalies, her mind whispered. A voice from another lifetime. Multiple anomalies. Coordinated? Possible. Threat assessment? Elevated. She pushed her cart past the main conference room. Through the glass walls, she could see a high-level meeting in progress. Preston was there, of course, along with the company's CEO and a distinguished-looking man in a dark suit she didn't recognize. The man had the ramrod-straight posture of a career military officer. He was the real power in the room. The CEO deferred to him, and even Preston was uncharacteristically subdued. A VIP target? The thought was automatic, unwelcome. She pushed it down. This wasn't her world anymore. This wasn't the dust of Kandahar or the fetid jungles of some forgotten conflict. This was a corporate office. Her job was coffee. At precisely 3:30 p.m., the power went out. It wasn't the flickering brownout of a strained city grid. It was a sudden, violent severance. The lights died. The computer monitors went black. The constant low hum of the building's HVAC system ceased. An emergency generator kicked in a second later, casting the 47th floor in the eerie half-light of red emergency strips along the floor. A collective gasp went through the office. Then, nervous laughter. Someone forgot to pay the electric bill, Sterling, Greg, the analyst, joked weakly. Preston, annoyed at the interruption, stood up. IT is on it, I'm sure. Everyone stay calm. But Elena wasn't calm. She was frozen. In the sudden silence, she heard it. A sound no one else registered, lost beneath the first stirrings of panic. It was the soft, metallic click-clack of a weapon's fire selector being switched from safe to semi-auto. It came from the direction of the main elevator bank, from where the new guard was posted. Then she heard another sound, the faint High-pitched whine of shaped charges being armed. From the stairwell doors, coordinated entry, multiple breach points, professional. This is an assault. The thoughts weren't hers anymore. They belonged to someone else. Someone she had buried under years of quiet servitude. They belonged to Phantom 9. The stairwell door at the far end of the floor blew inwards with a deafening crump, the metal frame twisting like paper. The glass doors to the elevator bank shattered simultaneously. Black-clad figures, clad in tactical gear and carrying suppressed MP7s, poured into the room. They moved with terrifying speed and precision, fanning out, securing corners, their movements a brutal ballet of violence. "Nobody move on the floor now!" The voice was distorted by a helmet, flat and devoid of emotion. Screams erupted. The young, ambitious titans of the 47th floor were reduced to terrified children, scrambling under desks, crying, whimpering. Sterling Preston stood frozen for a second, his face a mask of disbelief and outrage. "Do you know who I am? This is a private floor." One of the operators leveled his weapon at Preston's chest. The red laser dot danced over his heart. On the floor. Preston collapsed, his expensive suit crumpling onto the marble as if his bones had dissolved. Elena was already moving. The moment the door blew, her body had reacted before her mind could protest. She wasn't the slow, shuffling old woman anymore. The limp was gone, replaced by a low, predatory crouch. She shoved her coffee cart with a sudden, violent burst of strength, sending it careening into the path of two advancing operators, creating a momentary obstacle. They cursed, sidestepping the cart as porcelain cups shattered on the floor. It bought her 3 seconds. She didn't run for cover. She ran toward the chaos. She grabbed the terrified intern, Chloe, and shoved her under a heavy oak desk. "Stay down. Don't make a sound," she commanded. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was low, guttural, and radiated absolute authority. Chloe stared at her, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. The trembling, whispered voice of the coffee lady was gone. This was someone else. Elena's eyes swept the room, her brain processing information at a blinding speed. 6 hostiles on this floor, 2 at the west stairwell, 2 at the elevator bank, 2 moving toward the main conference room. Objective: the VIP standard smash and grab need to disrupt their plan, create a secondary problem. She ducked behind a large marble pillar, her heart hammering not with fear, but with a familiar cold rhythm. Her left leg screamed in protest, a hot flare of pain from the old wound, shrapnel from a long-forgotten IED. She ignored it. Pain was just data. The operators were efficient. They rounded up the cowering employees, zip-tying their hands, forcing them into the center of the room. 2 of them kicked open the door to the main conference room. "General Armitage," the lead operator said, his voice calm, "you're coming with us. No one else has to get hurt." The distinguished man, General Armitage, stood his ground. "I don't think so." The operator sighed, a sound of professional impatience. He raised his weapon and fired 2 rounds into the ceiling. Plaster dust rained down. "That wasn't a request, General." As the General's 2 corporate security guards moved to intervene, the operators dispatched them with brutal efficiency, not with bullets, but with swift, disabling strikes to the throat and knee. The guards went down, gagging and writhing. That's when Elena acted. From her galley, she had one essential tool, a large, pressurized canister of carbon dioxide used for the fancy soda water machine. It was heavy, awkward, but it was a weapon. Gritting her teeth against the fire in her leg, she hoisted it onto her shoulder. She saw her opening. The 2 operators guarding the main group of hostages had their backs to her, their attention focused on the drama unfolding in the conference room. She moved, not shuffling, but flowing from cover to cover. She was a ghost, just as they had always thought, but a different kind entirely. She reached the edge of a large decorative ficus plant 20 feet from the operators. She twisted the valve on the canister. A thick white cloud of freezing CO2 gas erupted with a loud hiss, engulfing the 2 men. They cried out in shock and pain as the super-chilled gas hit their exposed skin. It was a perfect diversion. Their discipline broke for a single fatal second. They turned toward the sound. In that second, Elena was on them. She moved with a speed that defied her age. She brought the heavy steel canister around in a vicious arc, slamming it into the side of the first operator's helmet. The clang of metal on Kevlar echoed in the room. He staggered, his ears ringing, his vision swimming. She didn't wait for him to recover. She dropped the canister and drove the heel of her hand up under his chin, snapping his head back. He crumpled. The second operator was already turning back, bringing his MP7 to bear. Elena was too close. Her hand shot out and grabbed the barrel of the weapon, forcing it upwards as he fired a short, muffled burst into the ceiling. At the same time, her other hand, the one that always trembled, shot forward, 2 fingers extended and rigid. She jabbed them into the soft spot of his throat just above the collarbone. A tracheal strike. The man dropped his rifle, his hands flying to his neck as he made a horrible gagging sound, unable to breathe. He stumbled backward and fell, his body convulsing. 2 hostiles down in under 5 seconds. Silence. Every person in the room, hostages and hostiles alike, stared, frozen in disbelief. They had just watched the slow, frail coffee lady neutralize 2 professional mercenaries with a fire extinguisher and her bare hands. Sterling Preston, his face pressed against the cold marble, gaped. It was impossible. It was a hallucination. The lead operator in the conference room turned, his weapon tracking toward Elena. "Who the hell are you?" he snarled. Elena ignored him. Her attention was on General Armitage. As the chaos had erupted, the general had made a move for the door, but the second operator in the room had shoved him back violently. The general had fallen hard against the corner of the heavy mahogany conference table. Now he was clutching his chest, his face pale, his breathing ragged. "General!" Elena's new voice cut through the room like a razor. She was already moving toward him. "Look at me. What's the pain like? Crushing? Radiating to your left arm?" General Armitage, gasping, could only nod. "Massive blunt force trauma to the chest," she diagnosed out loud, her eyes scanning his condition with a practiced clinical gaze. "Possible cardiac contusion, but the pattern suggests tension pneumothorax. His left lung has collapsed." The lead operator took a step forward. "Stay where you are." Elena didn't even look at him. She was focused on her patient. "He's developing tracheal deviation. See how his windpipe is shifting to the right? His heart and great vessels are being compressed. He's got maybe 90 seconds before he goes into cardiac arrest." Her voice was completely calm, a lecturer explaining a problem to a class. To Sterling, huddled on the floor, it was gibberish. To the operators, it was the language of a battlefield medic. The lead operator hesitated. His mission was to extract the general, not deliver a corpse. "What are you, a doctor?" Elena laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. "Something like that." She turned to the terrified group of hostages. "I need a belt, a pen, a thick one, and the alcohol swabs from the first aid kit on the wall. Now!" No one moved. They were paralyzed by fear and confusion. "Move!" she roared, and the sheer force of her command broke the spell. The intern, Chloe, scrambled to the first aid kit. A petrified analyst fumbled with his belt. "You," Elena said, pointing directly at Sterling Preston, "get over here." Preston stared at her, his mind refusing to process the scene. The cleaning lady was ordering him around. "Me?" he squeaked. "Yes, you. Your hands are free. I need you to apply pressure if he starts bleeding. Can you do that, or are you going to be completely useless?" Stung by the insult and propelled by a fear greater than his pride, Preston crawled over. Chloe arrived with the swabs and a pen. Elena took them. Good girl. She ripped open a swab packet with her teeth and began cleaning a space on the general's chest between his second and third ribs. Her hands were rock steady. The tremor was gone, burned away by the fire of purpose. The lead operator watched her, his weapon still trained on her, a look of dawning comprehension on his face. "You're not just a doctor." Elena looked up at him, her eyes chips of ice. "I'm the person who's going to keep your asset alive. Now back off and give me room to work, or your mission is a failure. Your call." She didn't wait for an answer. She took the thick plastic pen, broke it in half, and discarded the ink cartridge, leaving a hollow, rigid tube, a makeshift catheter. She took the 14-gauge needle she'd retrieved from the first aid kit, a tool for deep splinters, but perfect for this. She was improvising, just like she had in 100 ditches and bombed-out buildings. "General, this is going to hurt," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Stay with me." With a smooth, practiced motion, she plunged the needle into the general's chest, just over the top of the third rib to avoid the neurovascular bundle underneath. There was a soft hiss, like air escaping a punctured tire. It was the sound of trapped air from his ruptured lung releasing from his pleural cavity. The general's agonized gasp eased slightly. "That's it," she murmured. "That's it." She threaded the hollow pen casing into the hole as she withdrew the needle, creating a one-way valve. The tracheal deviation began to correct itself. Color started to return to the general's face. It was a miracle. A piece of battlefield surgery performed with office supplies in the middle of a corporate high-rise. The lead operator lowered his weapon a few inches. He was a professional, and he recognized another professional at work. A far more dangerous one than he had anticipated. "The building is on lockdown," he said, more to himself than to her. "No one is getting in or out. We still have the advantage." Elena finished taping the chest tube in place and checked the general's pulse. It was stabilizing. She looked up, and for the first time, a small, cold smile touched her lips. "You think so?" she said. That's when they heard it. Faint at first, then growing rapidly louder. A sound that doesn't belong in the canyons of downtown. The deep, percussive whump, whump, whump of heavy-lift military helicopters. Not one. Multiple. The lead operator's head snapped toward the window. 3 matte black MH-60 Blackhawks were holding position around the tower, their side doors open, revealing heavily armed men in the same elite tactical gear as the operators inside. But this gear was different. U.S. military markings. On the roof of the opposite building, 2 sniper teams were already in position, their high-powered rifles glinting in the afternoon sun. The radio on the lead operator's chest crackled to life. It wasn't his channel. It was a broadcast overriding all frequencies. "To the hostile elements in the Sterling Vance Tower, this is Commander Thorne of the United States Naval Special Warfare Development Group. You have 30 seconds to lay down your weapons and surrender. You have assaulted a secure facility and taken a 4-star general. There is no escape. There is no negotiation." The lead operator cursed, a string of fluent Russian. His mission was blown. This wasn't a corporate security response. This was Tier 1. How? How could they have responded so fast? The general's security detail hadn't even had time to make a call. Then he looked at Elena. She was wiping the general's brow. The old, gray-haired coffee lady. It couldn't be. Commander Thorne's voice came over the radio again, the tone shifting from a general broadcast to something deeply personal. The signal was clear, cutting through the tense air of the 47th floor like a knife. "Phantom 9, the voice said, the formal command tone replaced with one of profound respect and urgency. "Phantom 9, this is Angel 6. We are on station. Do you require immediate assistance? What is your status, over?" A dead silence fell over the room. The remaining hostiles froze. Sterling Preston looked up from the floor, his face a mask of utter confusion. Phantom 9? What was that? A code? General Armitage, conscious and breathing more easily, slowly turned his head toward the old woman who had just saved his life. His eyes, clouded with pain, widened in recognition. He had heard that call sign before, in classified briefings, in hushed, reverent tones in the halls of the Pentagon. A legend, a ghost operator from the early days of the global war on terror, a pioneer of forward surgical teams embedded with SEALs, an operator so secret her file was sealed even to most of the intelligence community, an operator who had supposedly died in a helicopter crash in the Hindu Kush a decade ago. Elena reached down and calmly took the radio from the belt of the neutralized operator she had taken down. She keyed the mic. Her voice, when she spoke, was not the whisper of a servant or the roar of a commander. It was the flat-clipped professional cadence of a soldier reporting in. "Angel 6, this is Phantom 9, she said, her voice echoing from the small speaker. "I am Green. I have the package. He is stable but requires immediate evac. Tension pneumothorax now managed. I've neutralized 2 hostiles. There are 4 remaining on this floor, armed with MP7s. Advise your entry team. We are located on the 47th floor, southeast corner." Commander Thorne's voice came back instantly, laced with relief. "Copy that, Phantom 9. Good to hear your voice. Entry team is coming through the west windows. Stand by." The lead operator stared at Elena, his face pale behind his balaclava. He finally understood. They hadn't been compromised by a security call. They had stumbled into a ghost. They hadn't taken a general hostage. They had taken a general hostage in the presence of one of the most decorated and dangerous operators in modern military history. Their catastrophic bad luck was immeasurable. He slowly, deliberately, placed his weapon on the floor and raised his hands. His men followed suit. It was over. 2 minutes later, the windows on the far side of the office exploded inwards as 4 soldiers on fast ropes crashed through, weapons ready. They moved with the same fluid lethality as the mercenaries, but with the unmistakable authority of the state. They secured the surrendered hostiles, their movements a blur of efficiency. Commander Thorne was the last one in. He was a mountain of a man, his face grim, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Elena. He strode across the room, his boots crunching on shattered glass, ignoring everyone. The CEO, the cowering executives, the captured mercenaries. He walked right past Sterling Preston, who was still on his knees, looking like his entire world had just been unwritten. Thorne stopped directly in front of Elena, who was still kneeling beside General Armitage. He looked at the makeshift chest tube, at the 2 unconscious operators, and then at her. His hard face softened with a look of awe and profound respect. He didn't speak. He simply brought his heels together with a sharp click on the marble floor and raised his hand in a crisp, formal salute. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "it's an honor." The other soldiers, seeing their commander's salute, immediately turned and did the same. 4 elite special forces operators, weapons lowered, saluting the old coffee lady. The room was silent save for the whimpering of a few terrified employees and the distant thump of the helicopters. Sterling Preston watched, his jaw slack, his mind finally, painfully connecting the dots. The limp, the trembling hands, the quiet vigilance, the scars he'd never seen. It wasn't weakness. It was the map of a life he couldn't possibly comprehend. A medic from the team rushed over to the general, but his eyes were on Elena. "Colonel," he said, using a title that made Sterling's blood run cold. "Your work?" Elena just nodded. "He's stable. Get him out of here." As they loaded General Armitage onto a collapsible stretcher, the general reached out and grabbed Elena's hand. "They told me you were dead, Elena." "Reports were exaggerated, sir," she said, her voice now softer, the ghost of a smile on her face. "You saved my life," he said. "It's what I do, General," she replied simply. Commander Thorne turned to his second-in-command. "Get a full report from her, and get me her service record. Unseal it. Everything." He then turned his gaze, cold as a winter storm, onto Sterling Preston. "And who are you?" I'm Sterling Preston. I run this floor," he stammered, trying to regain some semblance of authority. Thorne took a step closer, his shadow falling over the terrified executive. "You run this floor," he repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "This facility is a major contractor for the Department of Defense. Your security was a joke. Your protocols failed. And you had Colonel Elena Vance, a recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and the Legion of Merit, serving you coffee." Each medal he named was a hammer blow to Sterling's ego. The faces of his junior staff, Greg and the others, were ashen. They had mocked a living legend, a war hero. They had told her to know her place. She was subjected to a hostile work environment, from what I gather, Thorne continued, his voice dangerously low. And your cowardice and incompetence during this incident endangered a 4-star general. You obstructed a commissioned officer in the performance of her duty. He gestured to 2 of his men. "Take him, and his associates. The FBI will want to have a very, very long talk with them about corporate negligence and security protocols." Soldiers grabbed a protesting Sterling, hauling him to his feet and zip-tying his hands behind his back with professional indifference. He looked at Elena one last time, his eyes pleading, begging her to say something, to fix this. She just looked back at him, her face calm, her eyes holding not malice, but a profound, weary disappointment. She had seen men like him before, in boardrooms and in forward operating bases, men whose arrogance was their only armor. It never held up under pressure. As Sterling was led away, the young intern, Chloe, who had hidden under the desk, slowly emerged. She looked at Elena, her eyes filled with tears of awe and terror and confusion. "Elena, who are you?" she whispered. Elena knelt down, the shuffling old woman and the stone-cold killer momentarily merging into something new, someone whole. She placed a hand on the young woman's shoulder. Her hand was perfectly still. "I'm just the coffee lady, dear," she said, her voice warm and kind. "But sometimes, the job requires a little more." She stood up, her body aching, the old pain in her leg returning with a vengeance now that the adrenaline was fading. She looked around the wrecked executive lounge, at the shattered glass and the terrified faces of the people who had never truly seen her. Commander Thorne approached her again, a satellite phone in his hand. "The Secretary of Defense is on the line, Colonel. He'd like a word." Elena sighed, a long, tired breath. It seemed her retirement was officially over. She took the phone. "Vance here," she said, her voice once again all business. The quiet, invisible coffee lady was gone. In her place stood Phantom 9, bathed in the red glow of the emergency lights, ready for her next mission. And for the first time in a decade, she felt truly seen.